What we're going to do today, no homework questions, actually nothing to even read. This is just a handout from me. But Adam is going to be quiet so that you can hear me talking.
He's probably not, if we're being honest.
Anyhow, so we're talking about the Spanish-American War. Okay, we're going to spend a couple, 3 days on this, like I said. Some of you're going to hear, especially on Wednesday's class, you're going to hear some of what we've talked about over Monday and Tuesday. Okay, so hopefully it'll start to sink in. That'll help you with your homework questions and all that stuff. Remote learning on Wednesday. You are going to find, it's live, that class will be live. I'm going to give you guys a hard copy of what we're going to be talking about and a hard copy of your questions. I still want you to, online under your classroom work, you will find the handout down there on the PDF. All you got to do is click on it, it'll come up. But I know some of you might not have a printer at home, so you couldn't print it off and have it to help you answer your questions, okay? So I'm going to give you a hard copy so you have it. I do want you to answer the homework questions on the computer. But I'm going to give you a hard copy so you can also answer on the hard copy, and then you've got that there to study for your test, okay? But answer it on the computer. All you got to do is find what you think is the right answer, click on it, and then at the bottom there's a submit button, and you submit it, and it grades it right there and shows you what you made, and then it sends it to me also, okay? But I want you to answer via the computer, because if we happen to go remote for any amount of time, that is how you're going to do all your work for me. Okay, so I want you to go ahead, and that way if you got questions on Thursday, we can kind of talk about it and try to help you figure out what to do.
No PDFs, right?
Nope. Well, I'm not going to say they won't ever be.
No, but like for what?
But for the most part, no. Okay. All right. We're going to talk about Spanish-American War. Okay. It's February 1898. Okay. We find ourselves facing war. And what's happening is sensational news stories has gone on for months and months and months about the abuse of the Cuban people. Everybody know where Cuba is? Where is it at, Adam?
Off the coast of Florida.
It's off the coast of Florida. It's about 90 miles off the coast of Florida, so it's not that far. Okay, and at this point in time, it is a Spanish. Stop talking, please. At this point in time, it is a Spanish colony. Okay, it's under the rules of Spain. But word is coming out that they're being mistreated by the Spaniards and this and that and the other. A lot of things are going into play here. Okay, people wanted the United States to get involved, but President McKinley kind of hesitated. He said that war should never be entered upon until every agency of peace has failed. But he didn't much more get that out of his mouth, and it looked like everything got tossed upside down on him. Events seemed to override his view, if you would. First, the United States press got hold of a personal letter that was written by the ambassador of Spain to one of his colleagues. Let's put the bag away before you end up in a hallway. In this letter, the ambassador expressed a very low opinion of President McKinley. Okay, said that he was coarse, that he was a weak man, he catered to the rebel, and of course, those headlines hits the American newspapers. And back in these days, even if you didn't like McKinley, it offended you that someone was talking bad about the United States president. So that kind of riled people up. They were, they already was mad about the so-called abuse of the Cuban people. Well, now they're attacking the American president with words. A week after that, the USS Maine is sunk in the Havana Harbor, which is the capital of Cuba. Okay? And of course, judgment was real quick to say Spain did it. They didn't really have proof that Spain did it, but they're like, yeah, you know, that's who sunk it. And in all reality, it probably was. Because they thought we were sticking our nose where it didn't belong. Okay?
I found out since my business again.
And the U.S. military, however, so people are calling for war. They're wanting to go to war with Spain over this. But think about this, our military is not
What it is.
all that up and running.
Fully constructed.
Since the Civil War ended, okay, this is only a few years, think about it, 1898, Civil War is in 1865.
That's like
So
30,
you don't have that
30,
long.
20 years.
And our military had been pretty much reduced to just a few cavalry units that was basically used to kind of keep the Native Americans in line out west, okay? We're not really running a great military operation here by any stretch.
Not anymore, at least.
So the Navy, though, confronted the war on a little bit more stable footing. They had an assistant secretary of the Navy, a guy named Teddy Roosevelt,
Teddy bear.
Hey!
and he had long argued that a need for a strong Navy. Okay? So Roosevelt was so eager in his job that a lot of times he kind of went over his boss's head and did things that had not been approved yet. And some of those things was he was buying, he was getting money from committees, and he was buying up ships and converting them into battleships and getting them with the latest technology of the day, okay?
Iron.
And he was getting the crews well trained, okay? So months before the crisis, Roosevelt had prodded Navy experts to come up with a plan just in case they actually did end up going to war with Spain. So he beefed up the U.S. Naval presence in the Pacific. Now, his boss did not approve of any of this. He didn't like that. He objected to it. But again, he kind of did what he wanted to.
Blew 'em off.
Okay? So Roosevelt appoints a guy named George Dewey to be the commander of the Pacific Fleet. Okay? Now, news of the trouble in Cuba people began to splash larger than life across the headlines of the American papers. Okay? And people wanted the U.S. military to go in and get with the Cuban freedom fighters and free Cuba.
They
Okay?
supply them and stuff?
Okay? Supply them, fight along beside them, the whole bit.
My
Okay?
family liberated.
In March, a very prominent senator from the U.S. Visited Cuba to see if it's really as bad as is being reported. Okay? His name was Proctor. So he comes back and reports to Congress that the abuse is reaching a boiling point, that there is going to be conflict. Okay?
Ow.
So McKinley gives Spain an ultimatum. Okay? Spain must enter into a ceasefire with the rebels. Okay? That's the freedom fighters. The U.S. also insisted that it begins a negotiation process that would end with Cuba becoming a free nation, no longer being under Spanish rule. Okay? Now, so McKinley asked Congress to approve the use of force, because Spain said no.
No thanks.
But about 2 days later, they kind of like, well, okay, we can talk, but by this point in time, the fuse has been lit, and everything is in motion, and it's too late to turn it back. Okay? So, I'm sorry, I do not need you to burst out like that. Thank you. Okay? McKinley asked Congress to approve the use of force. They do. So, Cuba, they were going to fight for Cuba's freedom. Spain then turned around when they find this out. They declared war on the United States. 2 days later, United States declares war on Spain. So now it's official. We are going to go to war. Okay? The opening shots of the war involved the navies, okay, of the two countries. McKinley ordered a blockade around Cuba. Okay, don't let any Spanish ships in, don't let any Spanish ships out. Okay? The U.S. also agreed to what was called the Teller, T-E-L-L-E-R, amendment, which said, once we free Cuba, we're not going to go in and set up our government, okay? We're not going to take over Cuba. We're going to turn it over to the people. They can elect their own government and things of that nature. Yeah, it didn't work out too well for them. It did at this point in time, but by the time 1950 hits, yeah, it's not working out well for Cuba at all. They'd have been better off if the United States had just taken them over in all reality.
Now we're just looking like.
Okay?
Okay, so
Russian, Cuba, or China?
So, but the opening shots involves the Navy, okay? The Spanish Navy was hunkered down in the Philippines at a port down there. The U.S. squadron had been positioned near Hong Kong, so that they were actually pretty close by. I don't think Spain realized how close they were. So when the word comes down, the American Navy heads towards the Philippines. Now, as they're going, Dewey is having them toss anything made out of wood overboard. Okay, any
Easy like-
foot lockers, any cabinets, even a piano that was on board was tossed overboard. Anything made out of wood. Anything made out of wood. Why do you think they're tossing anything made out of wood?
Fire.
What do you think?
Trying to make themselves go faster.
Make what?
Themselves go faster.
No, that's a good guess though. What do you think?
Fire.
No, that's not gonna
Oh, that's probably part of it. What do you think?
throw them off. Like not like throw it off, like throwing the Spanish off. Like, what are they doing?
No, no. Spain don't care if you pollute the ocean. They're more concerned, are you going to shoot me? They're not worried about polluting the ocean right now.
More room?
Okay. Nope.
I give up.
If they got hit, anything made of wood, splinters.
Oh.
I love how
Okay? We're not talking little splinters. We're talking chunks of wood.
Look.
Okay? It becomes a torpedo that can hit your body. So they get rid of it. We also, right now, the ships are beautiful, shiny white.
Not for long.
Okay?
Oh, stupid.
While they're in Hong Kong and while they're on the way, they are painting these things the nasty gray that battleships are today, because it helps them to blend in with the waters. Okay?
Wait.
Okay?
How that
So-
failed when radar systems came.
Okay. So, now, on May the 1st, the U.S. Fleet steams into Manila Bay in the Philippines. The Spanish ships are in port, waiting. Single file. This is when it gets good, man. Dewey had a plan, okay? So you've got the Spanish ships all lined up down here, okay? They're in port, okay?
Can you drive on the
Okay?
water?
So you've got the American ships are coming at them. They're lined up basically one behind the other.
Oh.
That's
Okay.
so stupid. Or maybe it's not.
The Spain starts to shoot long before we ever get into range. They start firing.
They
Okay.
can't hit us because we're so.
So they're not hitting. But what they're doing is the American ships takes an outward move like this. And then they cut. The lead ship cuts. And he's coming with the side facing,
Oh.
Line them up.
and they start firing.
Oh.
Oh.
As he gets on down, here comes the second ship. There's 6 of them. There's 6
For
U.S.
American?
So
ships.
wait, so they're just
Six.
broadsiding them?
So they're coming. And then they circle back around.
Oh yeah.
Like
So it's a
sharks.
constant barrage of
Oh.
shells being fired at them.
Oh,
Okay,
you're
just constantly.
Ammo.
As one finishes up and makes the loop, here comes the other one.
Out of
So
order.
it's just a big circle. They're just constantly, and this happens. They do this for 6 hours.
Oh.
They estimate that the war or the battle was probably over in the first 2. They had destroyed most of the Spanish Navy ships that was in port there.
Damn, that's a lot of damage.
I want a little more.
They inflict a lot of casualty, a lot of damage. 8 Americans are wounded.
Uh-huh.
No ships are damaged.
Just seal them
no,
together with
no one is killed on
Yep.
the American side. So it is,
Hey,
it is, Dewey now, Commodore Dewey is called the hero of Manila, the conqueror of the Philippines. The nation was very pleased and relieved. The first battle in the war has been a very successful victory
Did that
for
work anymore?
the U.S.
It could.
Oh,
If
no,
you could-
I
if you could find someone in port, because you had them blocked in, they couldn't get out. So
Well, like now,
if you could do that, but no.
now we
it'd
have
be
like
hard.
metal battleships where the guns
Yeah.
can just
And like in
turn,
World
so
War II,
it
they had
doesn't
like
really
metal-
matter.
I mean, still, that
Now.
was an amazing idea at the time.
Now.
World War II,
Here
they
we go.
had like this little.
Listen. It gets better.
Like the little speech.
Now the Navy handles the first battle, okay? But unfortunately, you can't win a war without putting boots on the ground. I mean, you can
Yeah.
bomb them, you can shell them from the battleship,
Yeah, you can't.
but eventually you got to put boots on the ground, which means you got to send troops in.
I'm putting.
So we're having to send troops in. Now understand, we've got something like 26,000 men in the military right now. Okay?
Oh, wow.
Right now?
1898. This swells to over 200,000 men in just a very short period of time.
That's like World War II. It's like we
Okay?
needed
Same
people
thing,
back
but we're not talking about
when
World War II right now. Okay? But you're right.
Oh,
Okay? So it talks about how the military machine was a little rusty. Now, there's not some big military machine. What it's talking about is the way things were working. You think about it. You had 57 men working supply. Now, supply is who issues your uniform, your boots, your weapons, your ammo, your food, everything. Everything comes through supply. 57 men trying to keep up with all of a sudden, boom, it blows up overnight to almost 200,000, over 200,000 men. Okay?
Yeah, it's like.
They don't have the supplies. So and when they talk about the machine is rusty, it just simply means nothing is getting done the way it's supposed to get done. Okay? You've got commanders that are so fed up with it that they're actually going out buying supplies out of their own pockets for their men. Because they're getting ready to go to war, they're not getting the proper supplies they need. Okay? So the logjam in the Army frustrated Teddy Roosevelt. So he quits his job as the #2 man at the Department of the Navy, and he forms his own cavalry unit. Okay?
This guy's just awesome.
The unit came to be known as the Rough Riders. You might have heard of them. Okay? So he is he's along with the main body of the U.S. Ground Forces when they land on Cuba on June 22nd, 1898. Okay? The Spanish had held the position above the land at the port there. Before the troops arrived, Cuban freedom fighters were fighting, trying to fix it so the Americans could land. Anytime you land and you got the enemy up on higher ground than you, that's always dangerous. But that's how they went in. Okay?
Yeah, very dangerous.
We landed 16,000 troops. Okay? But here's the thing. This is what we're talking about, Adam. This is what we're talking about. Different parts of different outfits were all jumbled together. One transport had the guns. The other one had the ammo. Soldiers went here. Provisions went there. So it was not a well-orchestrated military movement. Okay?
Wasn't that stupid?
And the first thing they had to do, the Americans had to capture the port at Santiago. Okay? The Cuban rebels under General Garcia had joined the battle, but before Santiago, however, the troops had to brave the defense at San Juan Hill. Okay, this is what makes Teddy Roosevelt very famous. Okay, Teddy Roosevelt and the Rough Riders, they charged up San Juan Hill. Okay, the soldiers had a grueling march to even reach the battlefield. Now understand, this is summertime in Cuba. They are wearing wool uniforms.
Yeah, a couple people are gonna.
So, you know, the heat alone is going to get them. Okay? So, Many of the soldiers had been issued spoiled rations, that's food, and faulty equipment. Thousands fell ill, okay, including the General Schaefer, who was in charge of the operation, okay? So Roosevelt takes over, okay? It took a couple of battles for the U.S. troops to push through Santiago. Each one would be an uphill battle. U.S. forces had to make head-on uphill assaults on heavily defended positions. On July the 1st, the 2nd of the 5th Corps, 3 divisions, was sent to take El Caney. They estimated it would take about 2 hours to take. And then afterwards, they were going to join the others and attack San Juan Hill. Instead of a quick win, thousands of U.S. soldiers were pinned down for 12 hours. Okay? Yeah, they thought it would take about 2 hours. They were pinned down for 12. Okay, so that kind of takes away everybody teaming up to take San Juan Hill, but yet you've got troops there trying to take San Juan Hill. Okay. On San Juan Hill, a team with hot air balloons. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes, man. They used hot air balloons on this.
Yes, remember?
Okay.
Like someone would have them as like scouts.
Now they had been sent up to try to find the best route to get to the top of the hill. Of course, they become an easy target, so it shot down, but not before the guy could actually see a good route. Okay. So it would be a long wait. The delay caused turmoil in the U.S. ranks. Soldiers lay for hours at the bottom of the hill with bullets of Spanish troops raining down on their heads. Soldiers were edgy, ready to do anything besides wait and dodge bullets. Okay? And trust me, if you're pinned down like that, it doesn't take long for you to get very, very tired of being shot at. Okay. In typical fashion, Lieutenant Colonel Teddy Roosevelt took it upon himself to get things started. He'd gotten hold of a horse. He rode back and forth along the line, shouting encouragement to the troops. Finally, he ordered a charge up the hill. His troops stormed up the small hill in front of San Juan. The U.S. forces routed a Spanish position atop of the rise that came to be called Kettle Hill. Another volunteer unit. It was the 10th Cavalry Buffalo Soldiers. It was actually an all-black unit joined in and helped attack. Okay? Yeah, that came from the Wild West. They wore that proudly. The Native Americans gave them that name as Buffalo Soldiers.
They had like curly hair.
Because of the curly hair like the buffalo, but they also, because they were so inept at fighting, they were so good that the Native Americans respected them greatly. Okay. So Roosevelt continues to urge all the troops forward. A lot of troops would not go because it was too dangerous. But they do take San Juan Hill. Now they start to bear down on Santiago, which they kind of took it in reverse, but they did manage to take it all. Schaefer, who was the commanding officer, sent a note to the Spanish commander demanding his surrender. The Spanish reply was to attack U.S. ships blockading the city's harbor. So the U.S. and Cuban troops began a siege of the city. On July the 3rd, the Spanish fleet tried to break through the stranglehold, making a run for the open sea, and in the result, every ship in the Spanish fleet was destroyed. Okay? So the entire war lasted something like 3 months. Okay? Now, it talked about balloons going to war. You know, we use a lot of really cool things in war, but imagine this now. The car, you know, it's still a few years before Henry Ford makes the first widely used motor car, but the world was already coming out of the horse and buggy stage. Okay, the first motor vehicle built factory style came out in the mid-1890s. Only 15 were made. Okay, It was like a wagon, except it had an engine, instead of a horse. Homes were starting to rely on gas for heating and lights, okay? Companies were working hard to make electrical power handy for everyone. They tried out all kinds of electrical gadgets, all sorts of things like cooking and washing clothes. Plans to make electric power power plants were being discussed and built in some places, okay? So it was 1890, things are starting to, actually progress, if you would. We wouldn't think so if we lived in that time. We would think it was so far back. But considering you never had that, this is major breakthroughs, okay? The weapons that were issued to the U.S. soldiers weren't so up to date. The Spanish troops carried rifles that used smokeless shells, and they could fire without giving away a position. Anytime you shoot something and the enemy can see the smoke coming up, they now know where you're at, okay? So smokeless shells were a great invention for wartime. The Gatling gun, if you know what a Gatling gun is. Yeah. It was like the first machine gun, basically. It had a number of barrels,
And he had a
and
one
it
like
fed, and the shells got fed to it, and it had a crank.
Like the Vulcan.
And you just sit there and cranked it, and it would turn, and it was just like bup, 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 and
it was
kind of overpowered.
That's like the Vulcan.
It was kind of overpowered.
yeah.
Yeah.
But it was done by hand. Okay. They were big. They had to use mules to pull them into position. But once you got them set, you pretty much that was it. You didn't go around moving it a whole lot. Now,
I saw a movie that had one of those on the back of the
kites might not seem like something you would use in war.
A kite?
A kite.
A
Okay.
kite bomb. Here's the bomb.
No. By 1898, they had been used for hundreds of years. In ancient time, they were sometimes flown at night to frighten the enemies. Chinese used to do that. The Chinese would fly kites and scare their enemies. Okay?
What happens that scare enemies?
Because they didn't know what the heck it was.
Because
They saw these great big things flying up overhead.
It's a really crazy
Okay.
dragon thing.
Okay? Now, okay? They also lofted cargo up over enemy lines. Large kites could even carry men. How would you like to have that as a job?
No.
Be strapped to a kite and flown over enemy lines so that you could spy and try to get a count on their troops and where they were.
Imagine going to Dollar Tree and seeing that.
All right. Now,
I gotta send the prices.
then, excuse me, I'm still talking. Thank you. Okay? Now, they also wanted to know if dynamite could be carried by kites and dropped onto enemies. So they practiced this with just bags of rice to see if they could fly it up and have a excuse me, have a string they could pull that would release it, okay, at the same time. Didn't work out too well, but it wasn't a bad plan, okay. So the trial pointed out some drawbacks. The main problem was the skittish nature of the kites, because guess what? They're relying on the wind. You can't always count on the wind to be blowing the way you want it to. Okay. The flights varied with air currents and wind speed, and in the end, the kites were used only for scouting. They actually got to the point they were carrying cameras into the sky to snap pictures.
The first drone.
Yeah, basically. Another big story was medicine. Over 5,000 men died of illness. 5,000 men died of illness in the war. That was 10 times as many that was killed in combat. So we had less than 500 actually killed in combat in the Spanish-American War. Americans. 5,000 died from diseases.
I mean,
Okay. Okay.
men died KIA is actually pretty good because there wasn't like a lot of them dead, but great.
Okay.
Dying of sickness though.
That's when
Yeah, well, they died of yellow fever or malaria because we didn't have a cure for it back in those days. Okay. Walter Reed, have you ever heard of Walter Reed Army Hospital? It was named after this guy. Okay. He led a team of military doctors in Cuba And they found that the disease was being spread by
Female
mosquitoes.
It's all fake news.
Okay? So to stop them, the doctors had all the standing water covered with oil. If you have standing water, if you have a mosquito problem at your house in the summer, spring and summertime, if you go out and dump water out of all that's just standing still, that's where they breed. They lay their eggs and everything in just standing water. So if you got standing water around your house, you're gonna have a mess.
Yeah, the little pond is just,
Anything that is, if the water is not being moved,
it's bad.
They look like
One time I was dumb and thought it was, it was tadpoles, and then
okay?
But there's this.
All right, hold on. Macy.
At our house, they cut down all the trees and they're building condos, and they built a pond too, and there's a lot of.
Yep, and get mosquitoes
Yeah, like in
in.
this little pond, there's this like, there's a couple like little pools on like the fringes, and in some of them you just see a bunch of larvae just writhing around at the
Oh, yeah.
surface. It's like insane.
Absolutely. All right, now, to stop them though, they do have, all the water is covered with oil, because remember in our science experiments, oil actually is lighter, it floats on water, so the mosquitoes, it either suffocates them out, or they can't get to the water, okay? And then you just dip that off in order to get to the water. Even drinking water had to be topped off with a layer of oil. All right, so that kills the mosquitoes' larvae, and buildings were sealed and fumigated to kill the insects. By 1901, fewer than 20 people in Cuba died of yellow fever. Okay, and the Walter Reed Medical Center is named after 20 died from yellow fever. When I was in the military, that was one of the shots. Man, you got being in a combat unit, you got vaccinated for anything and everything.
Yeah, my
I was
dad
vaccinated
goes
for
on
yellow
this.
fever, malaria, you name it. If it was anywhere in the world, I have had a shot to prevent it. Okay?
Yeah, my dad, like, when he gets to push this, shot.
Oh, yeah. Yep. The mixture of old and new ideas with the war in Spain ushered in a new era. It marked the beginning of modern warfare. From that time till now, technology has played a major part of the wars in the U.S. The turn of the century brought in a flood of new ideas, and the nation emerged from the 1800s as a world power.
No.
No.
All right.
Cue the
Again, no homework questions, just hope you enjoyed it.